Welcome to Success Weekly with James Tharris, a weekly dose of thought-provoking ideas and helpful tips on improving your mindset. And now, here's your host, James Tharris.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Success Weekly. I'm James Tharris, your host, and I've got a very special episode for you this week. Got a great guest and good friend of mine in from Phoenix, Arizona. His name is Master Kenny Perez. He's been in the martial arts for, a very long time. And he's done a lot of stunt work in television and in movies and trained with some very high-profile martial artists that you might recognize, namely Jet Li and Donnie Yen. And their teacher and his teacher, Coach Wu Bin from Beijing, China. So, Master Perez, would you say hello to the listeners today?
Sure. How you doing? Hello, everybody.
All right. Well, we're going to kind of jump right into this. I don't have any major script we're going to work off here, so we're going to kind of work a little bit loose and easy, but I wanted to get Master Perez's thoughts on a few things. So we were talking a few moments ago about students and their success in martial arts. Now, if you're not a martial artist and you're listening to this, you might think to yourself, I don't need to listen to this because I'm not in martial arts. But I assure you that the answers you're going to get today will apply to virtually anything and everything. So success is success no matter what the activity or the endeavor. So with that being said, how many years have you been training personally?
46 years.
46 years, my goodness. And where did you begin your training?
I started training in Phoenix, Arizona, and I started in judo at the YMCA.
Judo, my goodness. I remember that. You just don't see any judo schools anymore. It's really hard to find one. So yes, I did the same thing when I started training. There was a school that taught karate and judo together. Had one teacher for each art, but they were both in the same school and on different nights. So that was kind of a fun thing until I got thrown really hard the first time and smacked my big toe into the floor. That wasn't too fun, but I really enjoyed that. So great. So you've been training for 46 years. So I think you have a little bit of experience under your belt, under your sash, and so some of the things that you talk about, the listeners can take to heart. So in your 46 years of training, let's start by defining the things that you might, some of the things, let's start with, well, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? Maybe some of the pitfalls to avoid for somebody else. What would you do differently?
Actually, when I did start back then, I was really kind of limited in what I could train because I was looking for karate, I was looking for kung fu, and all we had was judo. So, I mean, my resources were not as vast as they are nowadays, I mean, that's all I had available at the time was judo, so I took judo. Within the judo aspect, I guess, I didn't apply myself like I wanted to because I really didn't focus on the judo. I was more wanting to be like Bruce Lee or actually James West. So I was looking for something else. But I think, whatever the art is, even if it's something that's kind of not what I was really looking for at the moment or something that's a little bit basic than what I wanted to do, it's really just focusing on it and excelling in it and getting more out of it than I did and just trying to get as much out of that as I could have when I started in judo,
So you were basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, your heart wasn't really into that because it wasn't like what you saw on TV. Is that
right?
So you were kind of doing it because that's what was available,
yeah.
But you really wanted something different.
Yeah, I wanted something a little bit more. Judo to me seemed more like an older thing for like the older people of my days and like my parents and. I remember even seeing Barney Fife do judo.
I remember that episode.
So I wanted to move past the judo. But judo is a great Olympic sport,
Absolutely, it's great. So when did your karate training begin and how did you get led into Kung Fu and Wushu?
Finally a school opened up not far from my house, a karate school, and it was actually Kempo karate. And so I was really excited about that. And as soon as it opened up, I switched over from judo to Kempo. And I started training that for almost 8 years, over 8 years of Kempo. But during that time, the Kung Fu craze started, and I had seen different schools of martial arts. And finally, a Kung Fu school opened in Phoenix, which was Wing Chun, under Sifu Augustine Fong.
Oh,
and so
that's a very famous guy for those of you listening who aren't aware. He recently passed, did he not?
No, he's still alive.
He's still alive.
Great,
I'm thinking of Ark Wong. Who recently passed. Yes, okay. Right. So Augustine Fong, yes, he's a very big name in the martial arts, and you were fortunate enough to find him moved into your area. That's fantastic.
Right. So I jumped on the boat. I started training with him as I was still doing Kempo, and I just tried to learn as much as I could from him. And the funny thing was, he was teaching Wing Chun, but he was my instructor that first taught me how to do a butterfly. So
Butterfly
even though
kick.
his skill was Wing Chun, he also did other weaponry and other styles of Kung Fu too. So I thought that was amazing that a Wing Chun man was doing Wushu butterfly kicks and such. And then I switched over because I was having I was introduced into Shorei, and I started training Shorei karate under a sensei down in Phoenix for a long time, probably about 8 years again. And during that time, Sifu Fong moved to Tucson. So he left my city, and I was too young, but my parents would take me there on the weekends when I did have time to go down there and train with him. Somewhere along the line, I'd compete in California, and I met Sifu Douglas Wong of the
Yes.
Five Animal Style and White Lotus system. And from there, it blossomed. I started learning more Kung Fu from him, and he introduced me to other Sifus and senseis. And he actually one day showed me a video of some of these great athletes from China, and he said, "This is called Wushu, you should train that." And one thing led to another, and he introduced me to Anthony Chen, who and Roger Tung, and they introduced me to Wushu full-heartedly, and they invited me to go to China with them back in 1980, 81. And so we went to China, and that was the start of my Wushu.
Fantastic. So what was the difference between? This is a great place to kind of pivot. What was the difference between the way the athletes trained in China versus what you had been exposed to here in America?
Oh, a big difference. In America, it was like it was almost like an after-school sport. You'd do it, you'd go home, you could, I was like just a kid, American kid, and I could go to class, I could be lazy, I could do what I wanted to do, I could take my lessons, I could take it how I wanted to, or I could just forget about it and watch TV. In China, they're just happy to. Back then in the 80s, if you were on a team, it was very strict. It was very like ritualistic, almost like you'd see in the old communist videos of the athletes how they train. And they had to train. They had to train hard because they had to get where they were living. If they lost their position on the team, or if they were slacking, they would lose their meals. They would lose their job. They would lose their place in society. They'd be pushed back out to the farming areas or the poor areas of the cities, and so they had to stay on top of their game, and so they trained extra hard. Not to mention that the coaches were so strict that they'd carry around the stick and make sure they were on line, and everything was so professional. I mean, everything was like they were training for the Olympics, if you could say, but Wushu wasn't an Olympic sport and still isn't, but they trained extra hard, and it was just their lifestyle, and it was not like 1 hour a night, 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night. It was like 8 hours a day. They lived on the complex, and they didn't go home on the weekends. They stayed there, and they wouldn't see their families until maybe once or twice a year after the competition season was done. And it was just very intense.
So that was like their full total immersion is pretty much the difference is what I'm hearing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, they had full total immersion, which is why they were so good and why they still are so good. I've been to China with you a couple times, and my goodness, what an eye-opening experience. I love martial arts, but my goodness, to train for 8 or 10 hours straight through in a day like that's incredible. And to do it at the age I wasn't 15 years old. So it gives you a whole new sense of respect for what these athletes go through. And then of course there's the whole stretching aspect of it, because I don't think I saw one of the athletes, period, that couldn't do a full split out of the entire group of everybody there. Everybody seemed to get a full split there without too much effort. It didn't, at least it didn't appear that way. So how do they do that?
Yeah, they start them out when they're young. They have like the Wushu teams in China are professional level, but they come from amateur schools, and it's like like the Pop Warner teams or the YMCA's. They pick them out of these places, but when they're that young, they go to these specialized schools or like these after, even in school actually in their regular school programs they do it. But they work them. If they see you have the potential, they'll like stretch you, and they'll stretch you hard. It's really intense. They'll crank you and hold you in those positions.
I've seen videos on YouTube, and I don't know where they're from. It might be some of them are from Korea, but maybe from China, where they have somebody sit against the wall, and one guy on one leg and one guy on the other, and pull it, and then the third guy's like pushing him forward.
Oh, sure.
And the guy's literally crying, and
Exactly,
he's got snot coming out of his nose and things. Is that really the deal?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh my goodness.
And like I said, they want to excel and get that position on the team, because it's like being on an all-star basketball team. So those kids want to really make it, and so they'll go through the strenuous pain and whatever it goes through to get there, and sweat, blood, grasp for breath, and endure pain is the motto.
It's pretty intense. So now coming back to America as an instructor, obviously you've trained probably thousands of students in your lifetime now. And, obviously there's only a handful that ever make the black sash and continue on with you. Well, what do you think is the main cause of students like dropping out of your program or not reaching that black sash level when they have the potential to do it?
Well, there's probably three things really. One thing could be family. Maybe their family's not supporting them. Maybe they don't have a way to get there because it's usually younger athletes you've got to build up.
Sure.
Another thing could be intensity. They don't like the intensity of the workout. They think it's going to be all easy, and then after they realize how difficult it is, it's like, sooner or later they drop out. And then, maybe the other thing could be like time. They don't have the time. They got to go to school. They got to have a job. They got to do other things. But, it's very rare that you find the people that do have the time, they have the backing, with the family and people around them, and then they're ready for that intense workout. And those are the ones that can go farthest,
Yeah. So I know there were a couple of people you trained up to the national champion level. Could you talk a little bit about these guys and maybe you don't have to give names, but just some of their because obviously some of them are not training anymore, but some of them you took really far, and these guys ended up in magazines and in commercials and things like that. It was insane to realize that you had a hand in that. What were some of the things that you did with them? What did you look for when you found these guys? How did they identify themselves to you as the one? And what did you do with these guys extra that you didn't do maybe with the other group?
Yeah. It's their skills. Their skills. You can see somebody has that skills, and they have that in their eyes almost. You can see in their eyes they have the spirit, intensity already, and they're hungry. You can see that they're hungry in their eyes, and they give you the time, they give you the respect, and they're dedicated. And these guys some of these guys I helped train and helped them become champions and whatever. They had the dedication, they showed the respect, and they had the time to put in. But it's just, they had the natural inept abilities that I could see, or good athletes you could see they had abilities already of jumping maybe, or abilities already of flexibility, or the ability to pick up something quickly, like a virtuoso or a natural athletes, of Wushu, and you can pick them out. Some people get into martial arts because their parents say, well, he's uncoordinated and he's shy, and then maybe now and then you might have a couple people that get into martial arts because they're like a dynamic and quick and crisp and have some great abilities already, and they know what they want, So some of these kids that are self-driven or you already know that you can see it in them, or they can even see the vision of what they want to be in themselves, and they pursue it, and they pursue you. And those are the ones that probably, you can pick them out, and they're going to take them further, like those guys that I did do.
Yeah, that I don't know if you guys caught that or not, but that was really powerful what he just said there about the, you can see it in their eyes, and they already kind of having a vision of what they want. That's really one of the things. It's a big key for success in anything is kind of having an idea ahead of time what it is you want to do and where you want to take yourself, and kind of plotting a course from there. And so it sounds like these guys kind of met those criteria, and that's one of the reasons why they were able to go so far in the art. So now let's say that some of these guys, as they got up to that level, there was a B team that didn't quite measure up. They had the ability, they had the raw talent, but something was lacking. What would those things have been? What would have kept them out of getting that grand champion trophy or moving on to the next level?
If it's their abilities, it could be maybe they weren't paying attention to the instructor. Maybe they got an injury, or maybe they reached a limit on their physical abilities in certain ways. Maybe they quit training like they could. But also, if you go to a tournament, you never know what to expect on the judges' standpoint. You could be the best athlete, and then you're at the mercy of the judges. So maybe they were good enough, but they went to the wrong competition and at the wrong time with the wrong judges too.
Absolutely.
But everybody's different, I mean, everybody wants to do their best, and you never know what's going to happen once you get to a tournament. Sometimes the tournaments have cliques too. You got to be part of the clique to get in on some of the good competition and end up in a good position at the end of the competition too.
Yeah. And then speaking about competitions like that, you get to these upper echelon type events, not your local small time things, but these big ones. What goes on after the tournament or before the tournament that maybe students that are competitors gain access to that maybe somebody else that would never get to that level doesn't get access to?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like some of the networking opportunities or
Right.
training opportunities.
Yeah. Well, the big tournaments are great because they do have seminars and workshops, and you know, you get to mingle with the guys that you look up to or have seen in competitions. You get to meet the judges, which is good always to present yourself in a good professional manner. You get to meet masters and you know, maybe hook up and learn some new skills, or see other people that might do something that you need to pick up on, or you might be able to help other people too. You know, it's always good to do in the wushu world. Before the competitions, the judges are already watching and eyeballing all the competitors, and they have warm-ups on the inside the rings, on the carpets where they're going to perform at before the competition. So all the judges are sitting on the side watching, and they already have it narrowed down before the competition starts who's going to win. So that's one thing that's different in the wushu competition. They make you go out and warm up in front of the judges before the competition even starts, and then they go back and have meetings and decide who do they think is going to win.
Really? So do they bet on it?
I don't know if they bet on it, but you know.
So they have an idea already who's going to win. So basically they're starting out with an idea of the scores before they even come up, and then it's their job to either improve on those scores or they
Right.
lose some points
Or
with
they
the
lose,
judges.
yeah, right.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of probably happens at a lot of workplaces if you think about it. That with the manager and the employees, he's kind of eyeballing, you know, who might be ready for the managerial position and who's you know being groomed for the district manager and all those kind of things. And you know, some of them rise to the occasion, and others, you know, they find out within a short period of time whether they're missing, something's missing from that person, so maybe
so
they
true.
move on
Yeah.
to the next person.
I can see that. Yes.
So now thinking about your own training with your students and some of the guys that you had really, you know, high hopes for that just didn't quite reach their potential. Can you think of one or two in your mind who those might have been? What were the mistakes, if you could just put them in like 3 or 4, maybe 5 different things? What were the mistakes that they made that kept them from achieving what you thought they could achieve, achieving the potential you saw in them?
Well, you know, wushu takes a lot of dedication a lot of times. So again, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier. And sometimes they didn't put the time in they needed. Sometimes it was mentally they didn't feel they had that championships and to go all the way a little bit further than the other people did. Sometimes they didn't put in listen to their instructor. They didn't give me the time, or you know, just listen to that one more thing. They push them a little bit further. Like you know, they didn't break through where they needed to break through. They just kind of stagnated at a certain level and didn't want to go further and push further. Like, wushu takes a lot of dedication, and you know, if you don't dedicate yourself, and plus, especially in China, you know, there's 2 billion people in China. You know, I don't know how many wushu athletes there are, but there's always one guy that's going to be better. And if you're sitting on your butt at home watching TV or going out with your friends at night, those guys in China are like training hard. They're going to kick your butt, you know. So
Yeah.
you really got to stay on the edge, on top of everything. It's got to be always polished and ready to go. And sometimes they get lazy. Sometimes they're mentally, you know, if it's not time or whatever, mentally they're not sharpened. They start going and doing other things. I don't need to do that. I'm going to go hang out with my friends, or, you know, big deal. It's not going to make a big difference, but it does make a big difference.
Oh, interesting.
Dedication.
Yeah, great. Now, what do you think about training seminars? I mean, does that sharpen a student's edge, and students that go to seminars and get that extra training versus students who just, you know, do the minimums, come into class, for instance?
Oh yeah, seminars are great. You know, what would you call it? Supplementary, because you're going to hear things that you probably didn't hear. You're going to. Maybe you have this problem too. You can tell a student to do something, and sometimes they're not listening to you. And they go to a seminar, and someone says, "Hey, you should do this," and it's the same thing you said. And they go, "Oh yeah, how come you never told me that, master?" You know, like wait. You know?
I was probably that student for my master a few times.
Yeah. So sometimes they hear it from somebody else, and they can hear it that time. But yeah, you get to see and hear different things, and you're going to learn something that you probably didn't learn before, that the other people that didn't take advantage of the seminar are not going to be able to hear, or not, you know, basically they didn't hear the same thing. You're going to learn something different from a different angle and a different perspective, and that's all good.
How about attending a seminar on the same thing you've learned before? Recommend going to a second seminar on that same subject, or a third one, or?
Yeah, I believe it would probably be beneficial, depending on, you know, it's really your choice, I guess. But if it's the first time you went and it was kind of like, maybe you don't want to go a second time. But if
Right.
first time you went and you learned a lot and you thought it was good, maybe you should go a second time. And, you know, I'm sure that whoever's teaching that seminar is going to have another twist on something that you didn't hear the first time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's not, even when I've trained with you and your seminars, or just training personally, there's something that you throw in the second time or third time just because you were as you were teaching it the first time, it might have just come to you and you forgot about it, and then getting back into that. It's kind of like stirring a pot of chili, and it comes back up to the, you get that layer of stuff on the top that kind of goes away when you stir it up, so it brings things from the bottom. So the second or third time I've reviewed something with you, there's always one little new nuance that I didn't pick up on the first time. In fact, I remember when I used to come out to Phoenix, and I set my video camera up every time. We never trained without the video camera on, and I would look back at the video, and I would say, well, why is it that I'm not getting this technique the way Master Perez is showing me? And I would look at the video, and you and I were standing right next to each other. So, for instance, like with the Quan Dao, we were working, and I was turning left, and you were turning right, but because we were both turning, you weren't able to see it, that I was turning the wrong direction. And on the video, I saw myself, oh, that's the reason why I'm not getting this next movement, because I was turning the opposite direction, or maybe you thought that I already knew something, and so you didn't explain something. And just having that video, trained on the two of us, where I could compare side to side, teacher and student, was huge for me. I don't know, did you do anything like that with your training, with videotaping your performances?
Yeah.
And
when I was training, I didn't really have the access to video, especially in China. I wish I would have had a video camera in China. But back then I had a Super 8 camera.
I had one of those too, yes.
But
yeah, 3 minutes and no
I had
sound.
Like 4 reels, and they were done in like the first day, and then I didn't have nothing else to video or film. But no, when I did reference my Sifu's videos, because my Sifus would sell me videos or give me videos to look at, and that would help
for
me a
those
lot,
listening,
definitely.
Sifu is Chinese name for teacher or master.
Yeah. My Sifu was pretty generous with his video collection, so he gave me all kinds of videos of the arts, of what he was teaching me, and of other schools and other masters stuff. And yeah, having that on hand helps me sometimes when you do have questions. You can look back on it and such. I did keep a notebook though, and I had lots of notebooks in China, and I still go back and read those for notes and see what I might be missing, and that helps a lot too. Writing it down is great. I always tell my students, and they forget the next week what I taught them last week. I said, why don't you go home and write it down?
Right.
You got to write it down. If you don't write it down, you're going to forget it.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm not much for writing down notes when I'm doing something physical, because it's very hard for me to translate that into words and then look back at it and remember what the heck it was. But with video, it never lies. I don't need any. I can take notes from it in the future if I need to. But it's kind of, for me, it's like shorthand, and that's how I take my notes. And so I have video performances of myself practicing 20, 30 years ago, and I still look at them. I have to keep the waste bucket nearby when I'm watching it, because I want to throw up when I look at it. But it helps to kind of see where I came from that long ago and where I'm at now, and it's kind of a powerful thing to be able to keep motivated to keep training, I guess. So you've been training now for 46 years. What keeps you motivated? Why do you continue doing what you do?
I guess this is my passion. I grew up with it, and I'd excelled in it, and I've done so much with it. I just can't put it away anymore. And of course, it's my breadwinner and all that good stuff. And I kind of feel like I was. It's my duty now. It's my duty to uphold the wushu how I was taught from my teachers, from back down to my students. And again, some of my people I do teach, there might be not up to the level that I want them to be, so I still got to put it out there and push and help to promote it. And I'm just all for it. And like I said, it's inside me now. It's part of me. It's like the other thing, you even have it on your window, Jingshin Wushu. I don't know the Korean term for that.
Muro Chungshin, yeah.
Spirit and essence, spirit and mind, and is Wushu. It's in you. It's all mixed together and it just comes out of me. It's just, that's what I am.
Great. So how much training do you do these days personally?
Personally, myself, I really don't train like I used to personally, but I find while I'm teaching all the time, I'm going through the moves with my students and such. Lately I've been doing a big program with the Tai Chi and Qigong with older people, so I'm not doing all the crazy moves like the jumps and the kicks and splits and such like I used to. But I go through my routines. Maybe a week I might put about, about 6 hours, maybe 6 hours Monday through Friday.
So contrast that back to your peak of your competition phase. How many hours were you putting in a week back then?
Oh my gosh, I'd train, when I was young and didn't have a job and all I was doing was wushu. We'd train from like 10 in the morning and break for lunch and go home and watch videos till like it got cooler in the evening, and from 5 to 9 we'd train some more. So I had to train at least 10 hours a day,
Wow.
at least.
So you got 10 hours a day versus 3 to 4 hours per week now, which is
right.
It's incredible. But it is kind of like a bank account when you think about it, and you put in so much up in the beginning, and then it starts to collect interest, and you can sit back and allow the interest. They said, let your money work for you. Don't work for money. Let your money work for you. So you can kind of sit back and allow that interest to kind of pay its dividends. And I think that's what happens in your training. At one point, it just kind of, like you said, it becomes part of you. It's kind of in your bones and in your blood, and it doesn't take as much effort
Right.
to bring those skills to the forefront
Right.
like it used to. So
We try and hope that as we mature, we train just as good, but we just train smarter.
Smarter, absolutely.
You know?
Yes. Yeah, what once used to heal in a couple of days usually takes a couple of weeks now,
For sure, yeah.
So, well, do you have any other thoughts for our listeners here on things that maybe they could do to become more successful, things to think about, things to, some habits to develop?
Well, yeah, you got to be dedicated and you got to be focused because there's so much in this world. I mean, I got students come to my class after they went to volleyball and then they're going to piano lessons in between.
my
And
goodness,
it's
yeah, I
like
know.
they're
That's
spread out
tough.
all over, and being multifaceted like that, it's not really good if you want to focus and become really good at one thing as you're younger. I mean, you just really have to focus and a lot of people now in our society are just all over the place, and multitasking is the thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to take a while, and it's going to take longer if you're going to split it up like that. So I say focus is important. Dedication is good. Make the time. People don't make the time. They say, well, I don't have time today. I got to do this and that and this and that. Yes, if you make the time, if it's a priority, you'll make the time and you'll get it done. And that's another thing. People don't make the time. And have a schedule. If you're just like pulling it out of the air, I'm going to do this today. Maybe I'll try that and this and that. It's not as dedicated as if you have a schedule that you're going to follow and you have a goal and you're focused and you keep reaching for those things and after repetition and constant practice, you're going to get to your goal more so than if you just fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. So that's been fantastic and very insightful with some of the things you talked about today. So on behalf of our guests and on behalf of our students at our school here, I'd like to thank you for spending a little time with us this weekend. We've got some seminars you're going to be teaching here over the next couple of days. The students are super fired up about that, and they get the opportunity to learn from my teacher's teacher, which is always good. It's kind of like, going and hearing the stories of your youth or your parents' youth from your grandfather's perspective and your grandmother's perspective, and it just kind of, it adds some different element to the stories that maybe that would miss from what your parents talked about, so.
Yeah, it's
and,
awesome.
yeah.
I mean, I'm glad to do it, and it's just helps me to write another chapter in my book because we're just professing and promoting and propagating Wushu.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that's all we've got for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed our podcast today, let Master Perez know in the comments, and be sure to like this and share it with your friends. We'll see you next week.
That's all for this week. Tune in next week for another episode of Success Weekly. Do you have an idea you'd like James to talk about in an upcoming episode? Post your comments and be sure to share this podcast with friends.